Welcome to the full experience. This is where we get the flavor of an entire run of a television show by watching 4 episodes. The first, the ultimate, highest rated show, the lowest rated show, and the last episode. We are watching The Wonder Years. This is the lowest rated episode. Always a risky bet. Season 5, episode 7, Soccer, which first aired November 20th, 1991. I'm Tom Merritt. He's Brian Brushwood.
Yeah, dude. I'll cut to the chase on this one, Tom. If you told me this was a parody, I would have been chuckling for the first 5 minutes.
Sure.
And then I'd realize it's awfully long for a parody.
Yeah.
And then 20 more minutes would have passed. This was okay. Can I confess that I went in with the perfect headspace because it was a lazy Sunday afternoon and I literally had a half hour to kill while a render was happening.
Okay.
And I wanted to lay down and
take a
flirt with the idea of nodding off. And I was like, you know what? Do your worst, The Wonder Years. See if you can lull me to sleep. Had the best time. This was garbage television, and it was like it was suddenly a boring Sunday afternoon in the middle of the year was 1984. And I was watching TV like it was just waterfall.
Yeah. I feel like the cardinal sin of this episode is being boring. It's not bad in any other way, except it's just boring and predictable. Like I never cringed. I never thought, ooh, that was like horrible acting. I guess there are a couple of times when there was some pretty bad acting, but mostly I'm like, it's a fine episode, except for being entirely boring. And in 1991, kind of unforgivable. Like if this had aired in 1952, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it's the first time anyone told this kind of story, but it certainly wasn't the first time.
It felt like in sorry, MASH. It felt MASH phoned
there
in.
were no surprises. Yeah.
Well, I mean, but also like write a line of dialogue to explain why we can't be bothered to get anything resembling a real football field, you know.
Right?
Also, yes, it's clearly at noon on a cloudless day, but look up and squint and shield your eyes from the sun as you say, oh, maybe it'll rain. And then also, you know what? Just go ahead and turn on the fire hose while the sun's out at noon.
Yeah. No, it's rain. The soccer jokes, I guess, were funny in 1991 when the U.S. was still like, not embracing soccer. But
I didn't think about that because it's been decades since soccer was fringe. And even then they were apologizing in the late 80s because soccer was kind of coming in at that time.
The 1991 was, I remember, was when people were playing soccer. In fact, in 1986, 87 at my own high school, a guy who was thought to be a possible all-state quarterback decided to play soccer. And at which point people realized that my high school had a soccer team that they heretofore were unaware of. And there were a lot of people who were like, what is up with that? Indoor soccer was popular in St. Louis because the St. Louis Steamers were a fun indoor soccer team. But again, it was very niche. And it had to be indoor soccer to be fast enough to keep Americans' attention versus regular soccer because everybody thought that was too slow. So it was the transitional period. Soccer was starting to get a following, but not like now where it's like on SportsCenter. Like soccer was not on SportsCenter back in those days. So I guess these things were funny and of its time as people were changing. But so many things that are uncool in this episode are not uncool anymore, including all the Star Trek nerd jokes and all of that stuff. I'm like, oh, that's all mainstream culture now.
Yeah. And plus also, he's doing the Spock thing. I was like, oh, very, very cutting edge. Is this like a hipster kid? Because this would have been set while the show was on the air.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the fact that there was a curling reference was interesting. That was the one thing that I was like, oh, that was a surprise. Which is like, oh, soccer, is that the one where they sweep? I'm like, no, fewer people knew what curling was than soccer back then. So that's interesting. I also wrote this in my notes. The voiceover says, at that moment, Pops McIntyre became a coach again. And I wrote, he did not.
I thought the same thing, because as they're getting near the end, I'm just like, where's the redemptive arc? What on earth is he going to say? And then it's just like, that's, to be honest, that was the moment that I thought, would this maybe work as a parody where the joke is that like they were desperately trying to map on a Wonder Years episode to this? I don't know, but I do know that even the voiceovers sounded bored and everything about it. I mean, at some point I engaged with the mini game of just, wondering what extra was there, or I was watching characters in the background and then I thought about, the extravagant, this is how I knew something was off. I was so bored that when they made it 11-0, I was like, would they really bother to have 2 1s in the numbers kits?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I was like, no, I guess they would have used the one for 1-1, okay. What are they going to do if there's a third? It would
have been the American football number kit, which would require you to have 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. By the way, most interesting part of this episode, just now when we were talking about that, maybe the most interesting part of the full experience watch episode.
Again, I didn't hate the episode.
To be honest,
it was so boring.
If this was the basement, I'm gonna, again, my criteria for this is, does the full experience work? And I got to admit, we saw what an also ran episode of The Shield looks like, and it looked a lot like The Shield. If this is an also ran episode of The Wonder Years, looks a lot like The Wonder Years, as best I could tell.
Yeah, midway through the second to last season, somebody liked playing soccer when they were a kid and wanted to write an episode, and they let him to fill out the schedule. I definitely did not have an emotional reaction to this episode.
Well, and neither did Fred Savage.
Yeah.
But everybody was phoning it in.
Well, what's so funny is like there's no redemptive arc to the former great football coach, other than him going, kick it that way. There's no redemptive arc to Fred Savage. He doesn't become friends with the nerds.
He doesn't discover that they're cool, or
they don't turn around the team. Like
he doesn't learn anything about it. And by the way, look, I hate to get into script writing 101, but you ever hear of a character arc? Every character tends to have one, because otherwise, I don't know what you're doing. It's not a story. It's not a story unless
tell me at the end
any person changes.
He tried to tell us at the end that they all learned something that day. I don't think they did.
Well, and plus also, you know what? Here's a wrapper you could have put around it. Make the narrator said, I believed there were lessons in everything. And then at the end, have the narrator say, that's when I learned sometimes there just aren't. The narrator could have evolved.
I would have been like, that made the whole episode worth it.
Yes, exactly.
But no, they didn't. I kept waiting for the thing that would be like, oh, okay, but that's the unexpected bit. No, it was all perfectly on rails to the point where they didn't even win the game. Like, at least that would have been like a different kind of expected. I guess it's sort of unexpected that they didn't win, but also like they didn't do anything. They didn't even score. They scored in the wrong end. It's so predictable. As soon as they scored, I'm like, oh, they obviously scored in the other end because they're not going to win this unless they do the unexpected for me. And they realize that the effort to score one goal, no, it wasn't even that. So there you go.
There's a lot I can forgive due to the structures of the content, environment at the time, but
that's a lot of use.
Amos, how was your life transformed by watching this?
I have to say, this episode, it did not have a good story. It did not have a good narration. I didn't get to see Winnie, which was one of the things I was curious about because this is a couple years later. Like, did she change looks again? Because in the first episode, she changed looks,
Yep. They had a little bit of a different open. A few other scenes in the open that were different than the earlier season.
I didn't laugh during this episode. I didn't feel like I walked away with time well spent. This is actually, this episode is literally how I saw the entire series before rewatching the ultimate and the first. So
I agree. This
is how I felt about the show going in.
Interesting. Yeah.
So this wasn't a bad episode. This, to me, in my mind, was just an episode. Like, this is the standard that I'd held the show to.
100%. I had the exact same experience. Like before we started this, I'm like, this episode would have been my imaginary remembrance of it.
They buried it in Thanksgiving week in 1991.
Well, and there you go. That's why. That's always
I think
that's either like a major weekend for TV, or it's not a week at all for you. I will say that I was a lot more excited about the title of this episode, than the actual episode itself, because we are a soccer family. All of our kids have played soccer. I was hoping for something there, and I'm pretty sure if my children watched this episode, they would become instantly worse at soccer.
There was part of me early on that was thinking, was soccer even this far along in 1971? But I guess he's in a bigger suburban area than I was when I grew up, because soccer at the high school level was still pretty new in 1986 when I was like a junior in high school.
In 92, so right about the time this episode aired, not too far off. I was interested in a young lady at my high school who didn't have time to date because she was on the soccer team, and I didn't realize we had a soccer team at our school in Southern California. So
20 years before that is when this episode was supposed to be taking place. Yeah. Okay.
They looked nice in those uniforms.
Sure did. Yeah. It was a convincing auxiliary field.
I don't know.
Sure.
Like, I'm trying to figure out what park they're at for that.
I mean, I actually did spend some time making headcanon for that. I'm like, okay, so it has bleachers and it has a scoreboard. So my guess is these are the old bleachers and scoreboard from the football field back when this guy was the coach of the football team back in the 50s, and they moved them to the auxiliary field when they upgraded to the main field. Otherwise, why would you even bother having bleachers and a scoreboard in this auxiliary field?
But the field is also the size of a basketball court, so...
Well, I mean, I'm more concerned with who were the moms who showed up to watch this game and yet were totally disinterested in it in the background. So 4 moms show up and they all sit evenly spaced from each other and have no reaction to this game.
Before smartphones, they were not paying attention to the game in front.
Yeah, right? It's like you're not even doing crosswords over there.
Yeah. I did like the fact that the team they were facing was doing all the stereotypical things that people think of that don't know soccer, that think about soccer. The one guy's dribbling it in the air with just one foot, never letting it touch the ground. Another guy's dribbling it with his feet and standing in one place. Another guy's just bouncing it on his head the entire time. Like the stereotypical things that people think of that don't know like how soccer.
The director came out and told them, like, do some soccer things and show you're good at soccer. Like bounce it on your head or dribble it with your foot. Yeah.
But they actually got somebody who was actually decent at it, because that stuff's not easy.
I'm guessing they took a local high school soccer team and cast them as the opposing team.
Yeah. And thus was the most interesting aspect of this episode for me.
Yeah. Well, there you go, folks. That is Soccer, Season 5, Episode 7, first aired November 20th, 1991. The lowest, and may I say, deservingly lowest rated episode of the Wonder Years. Just one more to go. Our next episode will be the finale, Season 6, Episode 22, Independence Day. I think there's a metaphor in that title. First aired May 12th, 1993. So we're actually because this one was early in the season, we're jumping it forward 2 years in the air schedule. So stay tuned for that on most of these full experience stations.
Junior year, senior year? Because this one was a sophomore year.
Yeah, it has to be senior year because Independence Day, I'm assuming means he graduates.
Paulus in the chat says directed by Tommy Schlamme, who directed a bunch of West Wing episodes.
Direction was impeccable.
Oh no! Or this one or the next one? I don't know.
Oh no, which one? The next? Yeah,
I actually don't know which one Paulus was talking about.
Okay. Good point.
One of them.
Thanks everybody for engaging with the full experience. We give these episodes to our patrons earlier, so check that out at patreon.com/Cordkillers. Until next time, may all of your experiences be fuller than this episode was.